Hello folks, this is Pojo. We recorded the games for the Invitational without having access to our microphone. We had to turn our microphone off, and in this instance we turned our desktop audio off as well. This is the only game I think without desktop audio when we recorded it. But we were putting our stream onto RNG Eternal's stream due to the fact that there's no spectator mode in Eternal yet. So as a result, I had to record without my mic on, and I didn't have time to set up a second audio channel and figure out how that worked before I got started. So we're going to do this round with commentary, and we're going to do the rest of the rounds where I don't have my mic on with commentary. This should be the only one without game sound. But yeah, so I'm up against Crispah this time around. We're playing a best of 3, and this is the second round of the Invitational. And what we're doing here, of course, is the Fire Justice Time Tokens deck. I think you'll probably know that from game 1, but we got a pretty decent hand to start with. The Xenon Obelisks are really, really nice to develop early into the game, because every time you put those down, it puts you in a much better position against Lightning Storms, against Vara's Favor, and against Suffocates, all of which are pretty common in Felon Control decks. I don't remember the exact specifics of Crispah's list. We'll pull that up now. But overall, this is a pretty solid way to just get things going in our favor. So we're pretty keen on developing the Xenon Obelisks as soon as possible and pressuring for damage, because there's a lot of stuff in Crispah's deck that's really, really bad for us. In general, Felon Control decks tend to run just so many things that are nasty. We want to be careful about Withering Witch in particular, because that is the one thing that gets through Xenon Obelisk. But as you can see, we resist the Vara's Favor here, so I'm really excited about that. The hand that we have is pretty nice. There's a lot of good token cards. There's a Rally, there's Assembly Line. We're probably going to go ahead and try to develop those, but we might put down the Xenon Obelisk first, just to protect ourselves from the Lightning Storms in Crispah's deck. So now if I Assembly Line Grounded Drone, I have a bunch of 3/3s. I can also use the Amber Acolyte to develop the power a little bit and get the Xenon Obelisks going really strong. Once those get up to 8, all of my tokens are going to be virtually unstoppable, so that's just really, really good stuff. And that looks like an appealing play into what might end up being like double Lightning Storm or something like that. We're still expecting some sort of trick, since Crispah hasn't really played much yet. We don't think that he's out of useful cards yet, so we're certainly hoping to see some of that happen before we Assembly Line. But if it doesn't happen, we're probably going to Assembly Line. Alright, so I've got Stand Together here and another way to draw power. So it looks pretty likely that we're going to play Amber Acolyte, and then Stand Together is in reserve for when like a double Lightning Storm happens, or for when Withering Witch comes down. My opponent's Celestial Omens here. A lot of different cards that he could be picking up, but there aren't that many that are good against this particular board. And you can have a really rough matchup against Felon Control decks, but if they don't actually get a hold of your tokens, it's really, really hard for them to deal with you. Obviously, this is a Stand Together moment. We don't want to lose our Xenon bonus, since that renders us immune to the Lightning Storms and the Black Sky Harbingers. So we're really happy about saving for that Stand Together, and now we're in a really strong board position. I've got Infinite Hourglass here. I don't need it. I think if I attack here, I have lethal with Rally. I might have lethal anyways, actually. Yep, that's quite the bit of overkill. And even with a single target removal like Annihilate, that would be maybe not quite lethal, but real close. Okay, so looking into the sideboard, actually let's take one quick breath here. Alright, so looking into the side here, we know that Crispah is probably going to be looking for a couple of cards. There aren't that many things in his sideboard that really helps him. He doesn't have too much. He's got Permafrost and Backlash. He's got Lightning Strike. The Backlash really hurts against rallies and that kind of thing, but that's not really what we're concerned with. Since we don't see any major threats to our overall board wipe strategy, we're going to keep it pretty simple. And I believe what I decide on for this is going to be some Aegis units. We're going to throw out the Infinite Hourglass because we don't expect those Permafrosts to come in. Not only is the Infinite Hourglass really threatening against Permafrost in the first place, so there's really no reason to side in, We also just don't think that single target removal is terribly useful. So we're going to side out the Infinite Hourglass. We're going to assume that he doesn't put Permafrost in, and he'll never see the Infinite Hourglass, but he'll also never know that it wasn't in there. So we've already counter-sided against the 2 Permafrosts that are in Crispah's sideboard. Crispah's sideboard is 2 Permafrost, 3 Backlash, 2 Lightning Strike, 4 Cabal Countesses, 2 Champion of Cunnings, and Mistveil Drakes. And a lot of that could be coming in against us, but none of it is important as far as the single target stuff goes. There's a lot of scary cards in there, and a lot of them could really affect his strategy. But overall, like, most of the stuff that's really bad for me is already in his deck. So there are ways that this could turn out in our favor. What we end up doing is we throw in some Copper Hull Elites, and that is going to put us in a much better position. So we consider changing out some other stuff. There's not too many other things to change out. Claw of the First Dragon is a potential out because there's not a lot of things that it actually kills here. Steward of the Past and Black Sky Harbinger both have 5 health. Felon Bloodcaster also has 5 health. So if I put down that particular card, I could end up in a situation where I don't get anything out of it, and then he just attacks into it with a Black Sky Harbinger and zaps me. So we have to take that into consideration, and I wasn't looking to see if I actually took it out and put in something else. Might have put in an Ikaria or something like that, or another Aegis unit, because yes, that's very, very important stuff. Okay. The initial hand here is a little bit strange. We don't have double time or red, so things are looking a little bit rough. And we're also short our 3rd power, which can be really troublesome if Initiate dies. But there's not really anything for it. We mold into this hand, so we don't have much that we can do about it. If we get zapped here, it's kind of a problem for us. My opponent does have the Vara's Favor, which is a reason why we don't really like Initiative Sands early on against Felon Bloodcaster, but overall it's not going to harm us too much unless we don't draw our 3rd power. Unfortunately, it's increasingly looking like it's going to be the case. Missing a power drop is really, really bad for this deck since it's an aggro-focused deck, and if we don't actually get to play out our cards early, there's a big chance that we're not going to be able to win in the late game. Not only that, but Crispah is playing a decent amount of influence out on the turns that he needs to, and I'm still stuck. So I've just missed 2 power drops. I've got a Felon Bloodcaster breathing down my neck, and that's by itself enough pressure that I'm going to be in a lot of trouble here. He Wisdoms the Elders to draw some cards, and I'm just going to be sitting here for a little bit. We got Seed of Progress, and that allows me to Temple Scribe, which of course fixes our power such that we can actually play the rest of this game out. Or it has a better chance of fixing our power so that we can actually play the rest of this game out. I didn't actually draw the power, but it makes it easier to hit that power and get into a situation where we're not totally screwed. Diplomatic Seal shows its bad side here in that I already have enough influence that it can no longer fix for my influence. Usually we try to hold a hand that actually contains all 3 colors with Diplomatic Seal. Since we got stuck with this one, Seal kind of messes up our day here, and with an Azindil's Gift into this extremely full hand, we're in a lot of trouble now. Obviously, this deck usually doesn't care about Azindil's Gift that much. It can just shrug it off, play Vault of the Praxis, and continue to play units at a really rapid pace. We at last got our Xenon Obelisk, so putting down the relics is most important because the relic development allows for all of our tokens to be more useful here. And we also want to use Finest Hour to get rid of Felon Bloodcaster before it can actually draw his cards, since he used his turn 6 to Celestial Omen and his turn 7 to Azindil's Gift. That means we deny him 2 draws that could otherwise be very, very bad for us. Overall, our situation looks pretty dire. We lost about 6 or 7 cards. It's the perfect Azindil's Gift. Azindil's Gift is certainly a card that can allow you to win more in a very big way. And at this point, Crispah was already winning, but he kind of secures it with Azindil's Gift into the Lightning Storm. So we're not in a good position, but obviously there's always a chance. And we're excited about the idea of maybe getting a Vault of the Praxis, or maybe getting some inevitability and just not seeing a lot of single target removal. There are a couple of ways that we can still win this, and since it's a tournament, and just in general, we like to play to our outs. Desert Marshal's kind of strong here. We get to Silence Bloodcaster again, which means that we once again deny him 2 extra draws. Silencing a Yeti would deny him one extra draw and also force him to spend 7 power on Feln Bloodcaster, but really the card advantage is going to be what weighs out here, so we gotta be very, very careful. Crispah's deck mostly has single target removal, but he's able to throw out a Suffocate and a Death Strike, and therefore secure 3 draws for himself. Every removal spell spent here is another card drawn, so he's fine with throwing away all that single target removal, since even though there's a chance he'll draw some useless power, this tends to get him into a position to better win the game. It also clears up my board a little bit, which prevents rallies and stand-togethers from being a thing. All in all, it's just good play. Seed of Impulse here is no help at all. Eventually I'll get up to 8 power, which is something that makes Xenon Obelisk very, very strong. But overall, this doesn't look very good for me. I'm in a lot of trouble. We block the Yeti Spy just for value. There's not a lot of reason to block the Feln Bloodcaster just to avoid 1 extra damage here. Unfortunately, there is a Lifesteal, or a Vara's Favor, which is quite good for shredding our token here. It's nice that he's still getting value out of those Vara's Favors even after we've got Obelisk down. Usually they're a little bit wasted. Alright, Amber Acolyte is a nice enough draw here, since it gives me a unit that defends against Yetis and also puts me closer and closer to Xenon Obelisk being an 8 cost. And then the more Xenon Obelisks and Praxis tokens I play, the better off I am, the better of a position that I'm in. But he's drawn a ton of cards, he's got more single target removal, he continues to shut down my board and make it very, very hard for me to live. Black Sky Harbinger is the icing on the cake. That card allows him to recover enough health that he's not going to be in a lot of trouble from other draws. We're barely hanging on here, and it's not looking good. The 3/3 is a lovely card. We get to defend against Feln Bloodcaster if we want to. Yeti Spy is still a reasonable block here, just for value reasons. But we are on a very short clock now, so it's important to shorten that clock however we can. The Time Sigil's just no help at all, so this is almost certainly game. I could have played the Time Sigil to avoid discarding it. There's not that many reasons to do so in the deck. It's not as though we are going to be drawing 2 cards and spending our time on both of them, so yeah, a little bit tricky, but you know, in general I think it's a better idea to do that. Last Weird clears out this item, and now at this point I don't have a response, so we concede. There's no answer in the deck that can possibly solve for this situation. Alright, although there is something to be said for not conceding there, because if we draw Claw of the First Dragon, we get a little bit of extra health back. You know, I'm generally not in favor of auto-conceding. I think we just got a little salty because of that double draw. It happens sometimes. But, you know, just didn't see the last out. Oh, except I took Claw out. I have Icaria in here as well instead. Icaria's an okay card here, and it's certainly not bad or anything, but it's hard enough to hit that it's not always right. It's still pretty tempting here because it's got that Aegis effect, but I am really looking for a way to close out the game early so that I don't lose the game late. So we're going to go back to the Copperhall Elite strategy, which gives us some Aegis units to work with, and we're going to try to bump those up a little bit so that we can deal with some of that single target removal while also keeping extra Overwhelms in our deck and extra Aegises. Copperhall Elite was an interesting side. I actually don't like my sideboard so much for this particular tournament. We sided a lot against Icaria Blue, and tried to make sure that if we ran into like some heavy control archetypes that weren't Feln, we'd have some answers. And then like later on, like after we made our sideboard up, I'd realized that I hadn't really figured out what my plan was against Feln control or what my plan was against Stone Scar low range decks with the what's it called, Statuary Maiden. So I don't like my side very much. I think I might change it a little bit for the next tournament if I play this deck again. Although we will probably change up decks because it's always worth it to change up decks. You never know. But yeah, this has been like a really fun deck in general, so I think it's questionable what we're going to be running. Anyways, so it's 1-1 now, so we have to win this game. We're feeling pretty comfy with the deck overall, but there's a lot of risk here because of Withering Witch and Black Sky Harbinger, and of course Lightning Storm, which there are 4 of in Crispah's main board. 4x Lightning Storm is not the worst thing that this deck has to endure. You can actually survive it in quite a few different ways, but you do have to make sure that something happens. All right, here's the true tragedy of the tournament, guys. I didn't actually have... I wanted to side in 2 Icarias, and I didn't actually have enough stones to make the second Icaria that I included in my sideboard, so I had to shaft a premium legendary. A plated Demolisher, but still a premium legendary. I kind of regret that choice a little bit, since I'm still not sure if Icaria is the right side here, but, you know, I also figured that we might end up using Icaria at some point, and it seemed like a reasonable play here against what I'd seen in his deck. Doing it, considering how this deck played against another control archetype later in the tournament, I think I might actually push for that Claw a little bit more. So here we don't actually run the Copper Hall Elites at all. We go for Claw, we go for Sword of Icaria, we go for the late game stuff that's really going to like push the end game. And we make sure that we have Parliament back in there, and we're just trying to push like as much late game as possible. There are a lot of interesting decisions to make here. Oh, I do feel for that plated Demolisher, but we'll get it back someday. We're planning on crafting all of the premium legendaries at some point. Alright, so looking like we are ready. Yep, all of that stuff. We'll edit this part out. Or, wait, no, is it starting? It's starting already. Haha! I'm spectating my own games. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this hand is kind of nice for that Vault of the Praxis. Like, that's really shiny, and I'm pretty excited about it, but there's nothing to play here. It's tempting to keep this hand because Vault of the Praxis is very, very good against the control matchup, but overall I just decided I wanted to draw him something better. This hand has that same problem that we had with the last hand, where I'm short a color and I'm short a power, and that is very, very worrisome. We don't get the red here, which we kind of want for Grenadin Drone and Torch. But we do get Initiate out, so Initiate's going to help us get up to Marison's Disciple, and it also allows us to do some other stuff here. The seed is depleted, so we can't play Marison's this turn. Instead we play Grenadin Drone essentially on curve. Well, not essentially on curve, because it's not a it's not an assembly line. But we play Grenadin Drone on 3, and we'll have Marison's Disciple on 4 on time. So Vault of the Praxis shows up, and we're happy to put Vault of the Praxis out first, since it enables us to get some really great draws off of Marison's Disciple. Now, I'm already in the loser's bracket, so I can't lose this game. Everything's on the line here. And I'm a little bit worried because I haven't seen much out of Crispah's deck yet. I'm hoping to see a Lightning Storm soon. We see a Suffocate here, which indicates that he might not have it. And that's good for me. We draw the 4th power right on time. Attacking in is just good sense here. And then Marison's Disciple draws us a card off of Vault of the Praxis. I go for the Sandcrawler because the Sandcrawler is a very, very strong card here. There's also a case to be made for the Flying Unit, but the Flying Unit dies to Lightning Storm, so. Death Strike gets the 3/3, and that use of Death Strike does appeal to me. I'm really happy that he lost a card trying to kill that unit, and since we immediately get another one along with another card draw, we're feeling pretty happy about that. Withering Witch here is pretty brutal, but we have Xenon Obelisk, so we immediately develop that. Again, I think it's always right to develop your Xenon Obelisks first. Yeah, in this case, it gets our Withering Witch out of range, gets us out of range of Black Sky Harbinger and allows us to attack in for some damage, which is super useful. At this point, we really want the Black Sky Harbinger to be dead, because it's gaining him health, it's being a huge problem, and we need to deal with it in some way. So we attack in here, hoping to either rally or torch, but Crispah doesn't appear to be biting. Instead, he chooses a simple chump block, which is fine. It's not a good block or a bad block. We could stand together here to get the extra point, or we could rally for an extra 3 points and a kill, but neither one seems particularly appealing, so I just go for the Sandcrawler here. The Flying Unit is another potential option, since I could then torch. He doesn't attack with Black Sky Harbinger, which definitely suits me just fine. This is the real power of the token deck, where you don't really have to stack too much removal, because the threat of lethal is so devastating that your opponent has to stay back sometimes, even when he could be attacking in. The blocks here look pretty good until he throws out that lightning strike. Stand together is the perfect answer. The backlash answers stand together, and just to secure that Black Sky Harbinger dies, we use the torch. So, an exciting series of fast spells there that ends up ultimately a little bit in my favor. I've still got the board, I get a lot of damage in, Black Sky Harbinger dies, which means that he doesn't have a recurring source of health anymore, and that's really, really important for our strategy. Alright, Amber Acolyte seems like the right choice here since it gets me up in power. I want to get to 8 for Great Parliament, and also for the Xenon Obelisk play. I need to play a second unit to activate Volt, and Talar's Favored appears to be it. It's kind of weird that I can't threaten any sort of rally or anything else here, but in terms of development of the board, I think this decision is entirely right. We attack for 3, we get pointed damage here, and Celestial Omen comes out. Now, Celestial Omen can hit a lot of different things here, many of which are bad for me, but at this point, once again, because of Xenon Obelisk, there's not a lot of cards that perfectly answer this board. It's not like he's running Harsh Rule, and since Xenon Obelisk is always going to be a threat and Praxis is always going to be a threat, we get to attack in here with Rally Up, and force a lot of blocks. Yetis are not likely to be terribly useful. This looks like a fine trade for me and a fine amount of damage, so I'm perfectly happy to not rally here and not try to push any more damage. We can either Assembly Line or Acolyte, and I decide to Assembly Line here since that allows me to leave up power for Desert Marshal, while also just putting me in a really good situation here. Desert Marshal looks like a pretty good play at the end of turn, since at that point I have so many units that it's actually really, really hard for him to deal. Withering Witch happens here, and there's not much we can do about that. He attacks me... Does he attack me? He doesn't attack me, actually. And that suits us just fine. So I look at the board, and we do a little math, and we can see that if we Desert Marshal here, we have enough attackers that when we play a power and we play an initiate, we go up to 8. And then we have just a pumped pile of guys ready to charge in with a rally. That's a sick amount of damage, and that will be the game that puts us into the 3rd round of the loser's bracket. All right, so that's that game, and we will talk about the rest of them. They will probably have game sounds. Won't that be exciting? I'll see you in the next round against Sir Rhino.